Are you ready to light up your purpose in life, understand deep meanings behind what it means to live in this human experience? Stay tuned for this episode of SpirLift. Before we get started in this episode of SpirLift, if you enjoyed the content, please consider giving us a thumbs up. And if you want to be informed each and every time we upload new episodes on themes that we are passionate to share with you, such as spirituality, health and nutrition, motivational and inspirational videos, then please remember to subscribe to the channel and, very importantly, hit the notification bell down below, as this will directly inform you the moment each new episode is uploaded. Lastly, please consider commenting throughout this episode, as your feedback helps let us know how we can continue creating valuable content for you. Nicole, it is a pleasure to have you back on SpirLift, and welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Nicole, you're a favorite of our viewers on this show, and people just find you extremely enlightening. You really pique people's curiosity and interest in the subject matter we talk about. And I want to really focus on this episode, about an article that you had written on your website, Lighting Up Your Purpose, because we've touched in different ways and different variations about the meaning and the purpose of our human experience on this earth. Yeah. And I want to focus the attention really on what you had written in that article, because it is so interesting, it is so revealing, and I want to just touch on the main topics around it, because many people are really interested in their life's purpose in general. Yeah. And you come at it in many really awesome ways. So let's go into that. So you wrote this article, Lighten Up Your Purpose, and just to start off in a very general way, what do you think, from your perspective, is our purpose on this earth?
I think it's as simple as just knowing who you are. I think, like, if you just want like the bare bones basics of what I think it is, I literally think it's just that. But I think to be able to give into that, or to like fully understand that, there's like a layer that the Buddhists do that's like the knowledge layer. So like collecting information and reading books and understanding from people who have kind of already done it before you, or already have that understanding before you. I think that's like the first step. So that's why I sort of like to put out a lot of like just like information-based pieces, so that people have something to go off of to kind of like start figuring out who they are. But I think we kind of talked about this in like the last one, which is going back almost to the atom and then discovering yourself from that is probably one of the best things you can do to understand like what your purpose is. So your purpose is no different than an atom that moves something forward. So you're here to ascend or to move forward, move energy forward. That's why the cities that we live in look like circuit boards, because we're literally just energy that's putting into a collective to make it transform and to create things. We're just creating, right? That's why as time goes on, we create bigger and better things. And that's why technology evolves. That's why we personally evolve. We move from one thing to the other, because we're just creating energy and moving forward.
And do you think we all have that capability of creating? Is it something that is innate within all of us, that we are creative? And is it actually, have an important play into knowing who we are and what we're doing day to day? The aspect of and the concept of creativity.
I think when the right hemisphere of the brain is active, you're able to access your creativity a little bit more. But the left hemisphere of the brain is the one that's more active, because it's almost like a muscle that's not being, the right brain is a muscle that's not normally being worked for most people. If you go from kindergarten to university through the schooling system, for instance, it's heavily left brain, right? So study, regurgitate, know things, organize things. It's very structured. Even school, like having a bell and having timings and stuff like that, that's all very left brained. So it does sort of weaken the right hemisphere of the brain for a lot of people. So unless you're an artist, or you're just kind of like you're a weirdo as is. Like myself, for instance, I did terribly at school. I got kicked out of school a couple times because I don't have a super active left brain. So for me, that being organized and regurgitating information and sitting still in a class was just not an option for me, which makes me more creative then. So that's why going on, I ended up doing more stuff like entrepreneurship or innovating things or creating things or working in the arts, and working as a psychic as well is something it takes a lot of trust in your creativity. It takes a lot of trust in your own mind to be able to put that kind of stuff out there. So yeah, it's innate in everybody, but it's not accessible unless you work it.
Exactly. In a way, it's almost like a skill too. I mean, you got to kind of hone it in, and you got to channel that energy and channel the use of it in a way that can, that can, I don't want to say just make you happy necessarily, but that can come to life in a way that is meaningful in its own way. It's beautiful in its own way and has an impact on, because I think there is this desire that we want to make something of significance or impact people and do it obviously in a creative way, but it has to be channeled in a certain way. So it's just not just, all over the place, if that makes sense. No?
Yeah, exactly. So without the left brain, you'll just have people institutionalized. There are a lot of super right brain people that are diagnosed schizophrenia, right? Because they're so far outside of the world, and they do have access to voices. They do have access to spirit. Actually, a lot of shaman will say that a lot of shaman as children would be people in our society that would be considered schizophrenic.
Yeah, absolutely.
So those were the children that ended up becoming shaman.
Yeah.
They do have the deepest insight because they have deep connection to a world that you don't. But when it's nurtured in such a way, it actually becomes a gift, right? When it's medicalized and it's medicated because it doesn't fit in the left brain society, it doesn't fit in the colonialist society that we live in, then it must be medicated and then set aside into another part of society where people are set aside with mental illness. Right? So I think we're going to learn a lot about this stuff in the coming years too, about how much of a gift it can be and how to use it. Because if it's not being used, then it creates chaos inside of the brain and the heart. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to learn a lot more from like shaman, elders, people that have been more connected to these teachings for a lot longer than we have, because by having these governments and churches suppress them for so long, we don't believe the information anymore. We don't have access to it in the same way because it's not been taught to us, because it's been intentionally suppressed, because that's some pretty powerful shit. If right-brained people with even mental illness are able to access their creativity, they're the people that I know in my world that are literally the most powerful. They can manifest like this. They're so creative. They're so intuitive. And yet
it's so focused. It's so focused, that energy, right?
That's right. Imagine if people were taught how to use it.
Incredible
shit, right? But that's coming. Yeah. And that's not to deneg some of the stuff that is done in Western society too, to help people out with that. That's what is needed to be able to work in this society as well.
Nicole, in your article, Lighting Up Your Purpose, you also talk about the raising of sacred secretion. Can you please explain that?
Yeah.
Or maybe let's just start at the beginning, like people who don't know about that, the meaning, the definition, and how did this relate to?
Yeah. So the secretion that's inside your body, or the oil that's inside your body that most people have no idea exists, is called chrism oil. And it's also the same thing as Christ in the Bible. So chrism and Christ are the exact same things. And it basically comes from the Greek word Christos, which means oil. It just literally means oil. So that's oil. If you actually literally read the Bible now knowing this, the Bible becomes a manual to teach you how to raise that oil up into the heavens, or the head. So the heaven actually means heaved up. So it means bringing this oil back up to the brain. And hell literally translates to the word heel, which is, again, the lower part of the zodiac, or literally your feet, the heels, the lower chakras, the lower part of your body. So that oil, basically, what happens is that oil naturally falls from the pituitary gland inside your brain. So I don't know how deep you want to get into in terms of the physiology of the brain.
Go into that, because I think it's really important. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have a lot of glands inside of the brain that, again, it's not really taught a lot in physiology, but they're literally there. Even it's actually, I'm going to go into this later too, but even the nursery rhymes, a lot of them are about this, even Pinocchio. So the pineal gland is literally, it looks like a pine cone mixed with an eyeball. So Pinocchio, pineal, and occhio means eye. So when you look at the story of Pinocchio and how his nose grows when he's dishonest, or that's basically like the 7 sins, right? How does he become a real boy, or how does he enlighten himself? By following the right-hand path, by doing good. It's really interesting. So this is kind of like encoded in almost everything. I can almost break down like every single, like, fable, fairy tale, all this kind of stuff. It all will relate back to this. And it's really, really interesting. Once you know this, you'll see it in absolutely everything. So if the oil secretes from your mind once a month, when the moon is in your astrological sun sign. So just to give an example, as an Aquarius, when the moon is in Aquarius, the oil from my pituitary gland falls and it goes down into my chest. So the chest being Mary Magdalene in the Bible, or Cancer in astrology. It's the Virgin Mary. So something that's unborn, somebody that's giving birth to a son without it having had, fertilized something. So it goes into the chest. It then falls all the way down to your sacrum. So the sacrum literally means sacred place, which is where it's the coccyx, the lower part of the spine. It has 5 fused bones together. And then it goes down there and it stays there. If the conditions or your frequency are high enough on that day, that oil then starts to rise up Jacob's ladder, which is the 33 vertebrae of the spine, or the 33 steps in Jacob's ladder. Also, Jesus was 33, I believe, when he was resurrected. When he died, yeah. So when he died, he was 33 years old. It's the exact same thing in the Bible. So going up Jacob's ladder literally means this oil raising its frequency. And that's literally what ascension means. If you take all the new agey stuff away from raising your frequency or raising your vibration, what you're literally doing physiologically is raising an oil, giving conditions that are perfectly right for the oil to go back up into Solomon's temple, this back part of your head here, and it goes back up from where it came, and it goes into the optic thalamus. Once it hits the optic thalamus lights up. It actually glows inside you. It's electric. That's why you see Jesus with the halo. You see Buddha with the sun behind them, all that kind of stuff. They always have this like light behind their heads. It's funny because I actually have like a light here behind me.
Oh, right. Right. There you go.
And yeah, so that's what that means. That's also the myth of Mount Olympus is actually about the optic thalamus. You can look into those ones as well. So in the Bible, then, this part of the Bible says he goes into the land of milk and honey. Well, what that is that there's a secretion then from the pituitary gland that looks like milk and the pineal gland that looks like honey. And then they mix together. And that's a full electrical connection. So that oil that goes throughout your body, up and then down, that creates a full electrical connection, positive and negative energy. Does that make sense, or did I just kind of like? No, I did it quite quickly. It's a lot of information, I know, but like.
No, but it's fine. I mean, people can go back and listen to this again and stop and take notes. That's fine. But it's good to have a good, pithy introduction about that, because this is something people could be really interested to learn and go deeper into in their own time and read your article, obviously. But so with everything you explained to this point with that, Nicole, how does that then translate into, I don't want to say the meaning behind what we're doing day to day, but at least the awareness of what it can do for us and understand ourselves and our lives, I guess.
Yeah. So it's also called the fountain of youth. So basically what it does is it is the faculty inside of the body that's regenerative, that literally creates new blood. And it's crazy. This is what creates new blood. This is literally almost like it activates all of the centers of the brain that you're told that you don't have access to. It's like the universe is really intelligent. Why would it only give you access to, what do they say? You have access to 10% of your mind? Not true. You have access through it. You have access through it through literally activating those centers, right? And the way that you get there are the way that the Buddhists teach, which is to unlock the chakras, right? To open the rivers of the nadis, or in the Bible, it's the seven deadly sins. If you do the opposite of what those sins are, those will unlock your chakras, right? To allow that oil to literally raise up to your brain and start regenerating and giving you access to like full, complete view wisdom. Because when the hemispheres of your brain are connected, when that happens, your heart is in sync. Your body is physically regenerating itself constantly. You can't get sick in a state.
Because does it affect your immune system? Is that why? Does
yes,
it reinforce?
It does affect your immune system. Yeah. It affects your it affects every faculty in your body. And it's not something where like, one thing that I would look at if people want more information on it is there's a woman who did studies on Kundalini rising and people that are having these experiences, because sometimes it just happens suddenly. There are people that just have it because they got there's a lot of people have it pre-suicidal intent, like Eckhart Tolle, because basically he got to the point where he completely gave up and he his mind shut off, and it just naturally happened.
But why?
Right?
Why? Like, what causes you to instantaneously have that kind of experience? What is it?
Complete allowance of what is. That's it. You allow the energy to happen, because when your nervous system or your mind is active, that's why they teach this is what meditation is literally for. This is the useful part, is that it shuts off the autonomic nervous system from creating resistance points inside of your body that prevents that oil from rising. When your mental faculties are completely active all the time, it literally shuts off. Think of them, the chakra points, as dams, right? Just think of them having like dams inside of them. And when you're thinking, they're shutting. When you're meditating, when you're open, you're completely open, the energy moves through them.
I don't want to say the difficulty, but where I see sometimes people maybe get a little depressed in a way is, for example, and sometimes this has happened in my own experience. Like I had a few years ago, had really, really incredible, let's say, I don't want to say awakening necessarily, but I was really spending a lot of time daily with meditation and prayer, but like just very consistently all throughout the whole day. Like just there became a point where it just a few weeks after just daily, there just something happened.
Yeah.
All of a sudden that day where I just felt like an overwhelming sense of just bliss. I didn't, nothing, there was no thought going through me. There was no, like, I just felt like in a different state of everything. It's impossible to describe. Where I got, what I realized, this is the point where I think people need to realize to not get in a way addicted to the way they experience these things. Because, and let me tell you why, because I felt that and I was overwhelmed with something I never had experienced, but then it never came back again, right? Or I never experienced it again, you know? So the thing is, I think when we're trying to understand ourselves and understand how to feel better and how to know what it means to be happy, et cetera, we can't, what I think you speak really well at is just the understanding and awareness of all these things and how they are what they are, rather than you just trying to get fixed on it like it would be a drug or something. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, because even the act of thinking you need to fix yourself is kind of, it's redundant in terms of energy work anyways, because a lot of the a lot of meditation is just accepting what is, right? So if you're in a state where you need to do that to feel a certain way, then you're already out of alignment. And yeah, that's really interesting what you said, like it never happened again. Well, there's kind of a safeguard too. So the reason why I think the body is set up in such a way that you need to unlock certain parts of you in order and following a right path of literally awakening, becoming a good person and becoming conscious and aware is because there are people who have had experiences where they've had those sudden Kundalini risings without having done that work, and they become extremely megalomaniacal. They become very, very egotistically, because you become very powerful when you realize that you have full access to yourself. And I think that a lot of even dictators and people in history that have become megalomaniacs have probably had access to this, to this kind of Kundalini fire, this Kundalini power, because I think that there's also where there's dark, there's light. I do think that there's also darker ways to do this too that I'm not going to talk about because I don't really follow that path. But there's really good books on this stuff too, because it's almost like in the wrong hands, you know. It can become
distorted and used for, like you said, very nefarious ways. And you know what's interesting, Nicole? Let's say after that happened, after I had that kind of, let's call it, for lack of a better expression, experience, for a while I did feel a little depressed, like why can't I not feel like that again, etc. But then then later on, sometime after, I realized something. I realized it's not necessarily good or desirable to always be in that state, because I don't think that's what we're meant here to do. I think I think the balance of every day is important. So for example, for me personally, all throughout my day, I do incorporate prayer, meditation, time to myself, being in silence. But then I understand that I need to face the world and what that becomes and what that consists of. And I need to understand however that affects me as a human being, emotionally, etc. It's not who I am. It's not what I'm here for. It's not what I'm destined to be with this person or this situation.
Yeah.
It's just part of the theater of life. And I accept that and I know that. And I think it's good to hit the rough on the road, but then realign myself and get back to that state of prayer and meditation, because I think it's vacillating between the balances of those, the human experience and then your true self. You know?
It is, but eventually then you get into the middle ground. You get into the middle way, which is full acceptance of both, like you're saying. So without any friction, there's no movement forward, right? Without any light, you're just a blob of depression. So, right? It's one of those things, like when you're unhappy and you become depressed in doing something, or where you're at or what you're at, it's like that depression is a signal that you're not aligned. Like that's your moment to move, right? That's it. It's just a nudge. There's nothing wrong with it. But when you can get to the point where you can then I can't do this all the time. It's very, very hard. But we can get to the point, I think, when you can perceive all of the good inside of the negative shit, inside of the hard emotions or the hard stuff, then you're really powerful, because then you can kind of go wherever you want. You get to choose, but even if you're in that friction moment.
There is that, when you say that, there's this imagery of some picture I saw from a long time ago with one of these Tibetan monks who was visiting New York City, and went right in the middle of Times Square on a really busy, time of the day there, and there's people rushing by, and the smell, the honking the horns, all that, and screaming, and he was just there in peace. He was like, "Oh, great."
Yeah.
I mean,
have you ever had a past life regression?
Sorry?
Have you ever had a past life regression done?
Not to me personally. I've spoken to a gentleman named Leon on SpirLift. Okay. And he's out of the UK. He does that, but I haven't done one personally. No. Yeah,
so I had one done by a woman, and it was interesting that you said that he was just completely zen inside of that. The past life that I went back to was being a monk in Vietnam. Wow. And they were invading this temple, and I think it was the French. I don't know. It was really, really super vivid. and all of the monks were just sitting there. Like this military came in with guns. They came in with like, you know, screaming, yelling, but all the monks just sat there. And for some reason, the military just walked out. They didn't know how to handle. They didn't know how to handle that state, like that vibration that they were in. Literally kind of pushed them away. It was really, really fascinating. I wrote like a bunch of journals about it. It was really neat to see.
That's really interesting. You're saying that not just because of being made aware of that and going through the past life regression and, you know, someone really showing you that, which is incredible. But also, I really truly believe this. No matter what forces are at work in the world at any given time that, let's say, are on the darker energy side of things, and bad things are always happening, and people are trying to control people, etc. No matter how much that happens, let's say, more often than we would like to have in general, I always feel personally that the minute like the light, okay, just using these metaphors, dark and light, the light side comes out of those situations, it just, everything scatters, right? For example, that expression, kill them with kindness, right? Like I've personally, you know, been in many discussions with people, you know, where someone may be really upset about something and this thing and that thing, just going on and on and on, and I hate this and I hate that. And you're there listening for a while, and, you know, maybe up to an hour, who knows? And then if you yourself then respond in such a way like, hey, you know, like that has a lot of love and compassion and just complete heart into it, their tone just completely changes. I don't know if you can experience that.
Like that, 100%.
So I think the light is ultimately much more powerful than any dark forces, no matter what. I don't know. And
what it is too, when you subscribe to the fact that like everything has a polarity, everything literally has an equal and opposite, you can go into the rabbit hole of looking into the dark shit. And I do this all the time. I'm super guilty of it. Like I'll go down the rabbit hole and look into what's going on in the world for hours and come out just feeling like depleted. But I also understand too that if there's that amount of darkness, there's also an equal amount of light. Like it just is. The universe balances itself out. We don't have to do anything. Yeah,
we just almost have to just recognize, as you said before too, that it just is. The more that there is that, like Eckhart Tolle says, his whole awareness moment and everything he speaks about is just only recognizing what is. That's it. You know, because once you do that, then the natural force of life runs through you and everything in a perfect manner. And actually, going back to your article, Nicole, again, for our viewers and listening audience, called Lighting Up Your Purpose, and we'll include it in the show notes below and the pinned comments everywhere so you can check it out. But you also talk about this, you know, beginning this journey towards a natural alignment. So what does that look like? What does that entail? And, you know, how do we get there?
I mean, it looks differently for everyone, because like I don't want to be the kind of person that says like you need to do this. It's literally what makes you feel aligned. Everybody's alignment is going to be completely different. If you go really old school, a lot of the old school people will say you will basically get to the point where you're consuming almost nothing. You're living off of light. You're basically just an energetic body. And that's it. So you're doing the right thing. You're not hiding things. You're not lying. You're not, you know, because all of those things are having energetic karmic impacts on you. So basically the rules that you follow, I mean, it just follow the eightfold path in Buddhism or the 7 deadly sins. It's basically, that's it. Like it's that simple. Those are the things that free you from karma, right? The karmic wheel that keeps you in and out of your own alignment. That's why it's really, really important. Like we said, even before in the last talk about talking about your words, your intentions, the things that you hide are always hiding from you too, right? The things that you're holding inside of your energy are also holding you back. So it's literally about becoming almost transparent and clearing out the body. The experience that I had with fasting for 40 days was really, really insane, because it's almost like that amount of, when you're not having food and your body is not physically gurgling and digesting and creating a lot of energy, your body automatically goes into that aligned state. It automatically becomes, your mind becomes very loud, but then you also become aware of the fact that your mind's doing that anyways. But your eating and your addictions and everything that we do in our regular life is suppressing those thoughts and keeping them from your awareness. So when you fast, you become fully aware of everything that's going on in you. That's why the old mystery schools that would teach alignment, or they would teach enlightenment, or the astrologies, they would teach all these kind of things. They wouldn't let you in them unless you did a 40-day fast, because one, it teaches that discipline, but two, you become enlightened and aware of your mind completely. And then you become aware of how to direct thought, because you have to, because you'll go insane if you don't.
Yeah,
because your mind gets so loud.
It makes you almost deliberately have to shift a certain attention and awareness in a way. It's like flight or fight, or was it flight or fight mode? Was that expression?
Yeah, fight or flight. It's basically that. And like you have to give in and almost allow the world to happen. Otherwise your mind goes crazy. And then the thing that happens after you do that, you're able to control the thoughts that are coming through, is that I found that my vital life force just automatically kicked in. So like a lot of teachers now are talking about like sexual force, or force that comes from like the Scorpio part of the body, the regenerative system. Those feelings that you would get when you're like really attracted to somebody, well, that feeling, that kind of euphoria, that is your vital life force that's coming from the kidneys, right? So that energy, when you're in a fasted state, that's there all the time. Wow. So you're creative, and that's what that feels like, having the secretion move through your body in an electrical circuit, cipher, wheel, zodiac wheel, it's all the same. Everything is literally meant to connect your circuit. So for that reason, it's really important, I think, to clear the body physically. You don't have to fast, but like starting with like eating predominantly like vegetables. I noticed you did a vegan show. Yeah. That was, the vegan thing is not new. That used to be called the philosopher's diet. Mm-hmm. So people that with high minds, people that were able to think more clearly. I don't think you can think clearly if you're on a meat eater's diet, because you're eating death. Mm-hmm. Right? You have to eat to live. Yeah. So I think that's another thing too. And then obviously, like I said about the earthing, getting grounded in literal nature. Nature will tone your frequency anyways. Yeah. Let's try and spend as much time and without the noise of the city.
You and I spoke, Nicole, off air before, we're starting this episode about, the thing is, some people, just to contextualize this a little bit, some people really, and understandably, have a hard time just living day to day, and they really don't understand the things that, or have heard the things we know and we're talking about. Yeah. And they become really, for them, like in general, the type of manner in which they can feel connected to themselves, or just anything, just to feel itself, like has to be dependent on certain stimulus to make them just feel like there's something real other than their own depression. So
yes.
So people may rely on psychedelics, certain types of drugs, drink, whatever. Yeah. Mm-hmm. How is that really, in the end of the day? Let's just say, for example, and I've heard this, and maybe it's a deviation from what we really know to be true and what you talk about in your article and everything else. But some people say, like, for example, I took ayahuasca in Peru and I saw all the leprechauns who were God and all the stuff. Yeah. Maybe that's true. Maybe that did happen, and who knows? But fundamentally, how is that really, in your opinion, your perspective, even if ayahuasca can open another portal or dimension, who knows? But how is that really not, in your opinion, understanding ultimately the true essence of who we are and what we are, and not really our purpose necessarily, but just, like you say, lighting us up? How does that really take it away from it?
How does it take it away? I think it gives and takes in equilibrium a bit, because I have a love-hate relationship with psychedelics. One, because I think you can go really deep with them. You can completely eliminate the layer of ego. So if you're using it in a shamanic way with somebody who's guiding you, or the proper tones, music, and frequency, you can go and seek knowledge that you probably wouldn't be able to get unless you've developed your own wisdom, your own intuition. Because I think that's the purest form of wisdom. You're gonna start seeing information come out that's so much further along than what we have in books, because a lot of information's been destroyed and suppressed, specifically more so by churches, right? Specifically also the Vatican. So a lot of old information is starting to come out again, but through intuitives. So where I think it wins is that it opens you up to, oh shit, there's really is something beyond me. And I think that's where it stops. Like, I think you can get experiences, and I think it's really cool and it's really interesting to get those and have that information come through, but it's not going to enlighten you in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I think it will become a crutch if you don't understand yourself at your core, if you don't understand who you are in alignment with the stars. And that's where we can go and talk about how the reason that those stars are connected to the nervous, the 12 zodiac signs are connected to the 12 craniosacral nerves. Those are electric transmissions.
Nicole, I don't mean to interrupt you, but let's subject matter now, because we briefly talked last time, and introduce it if you can as a certain what is the theme of that type of topic, and everything we're talking about as it relates to what we've already been speaking about now. Just because that what the main sort of theme is, and then go into it, because it's fascinating.
Yeah. So just kind of talking about like the connection between connecting everything together. So the 12 disciples, we were talking about the Bible earlier, so I'll keep connecting it that way. The Buddha also had 12 disciples. Jesus had, it's all the same story. Honestly, if you look at every single religious story, it's all the same. Even Horus, the ancient Egyptian story of Horus is also Jesus. They all had mothers that conceived them without, it's all the same story. They're all born December 25th, blah, 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 blah. So those 12 disciples are the most important things that you can basically learn about in your entire life, because those 12 archetypes are literally every single person that you'll meet on this planet are connected to those archetypes. If you know them and master them, you can get along with anybody in the world. Wow. Not only that, but you can understand your nervous system. You can understand your brain and what's happening inside of it, because the brain connects through Mercury, through the energy that's transmitted from the planet Mercury. It goes into the nervous system, and that's why they say the Mercury rising, or the nervous system is ruled by Mercury in astrology. That's the reason, because it brings in information, electromagnetic information that's literally from the stars. It goes into your electromagnetic brain, and it goes through your body. When you're out of alignment, you're literally out of alignment with your stars, right? You're not moving in cohesion with what the energy and the frequency of the stars are. Does that kind of make sense? Uh-huh. There's kind of this and that's kind of also very difficult to explain, because that information has been really, really suppressed, because it's almost like a Sims game. We talked about the Matrix earlier, and how it's almost kind of like this electromagnetic illusion, right? If we're made of millions and billions of atoms, and at the core element of an atom, it's just space with frequencies that move between it, that's literally all we are. And that's kind of why we're getting our information from an electromagnetic being that's in the sky. Whereas the Bible says it's above the firmament, right? So the fixed sky, the fixed stars above the planet are literally the above to our below. So we're literally acting out and moving through frequencies that are coming through the connection to those planets and those constellations. That's
just mind blowing to think about. It's just, but it's incredibly interesting, really.
And each 12, I think I even have it here too. Each 12 rules a part of your body, and it goes along with. If I had something here, I could show you, but it goes along with the sine wave, right? So the 12 points of the zodiac are also the 12 points of a complete cycle or cipher of a sine wave, right? And if you understand those 12 disciples, you'll actually understand almost everything about everything, Because if you go back to the fact that we're atomic and that we're a frequency, then you understand the 12 points of the frequency and each job that it has to do, and what it does in your body, what it does in your life, what it does with your friends, your family, what it does in the sky. You'll understand everything.
Where, Nicole, either with something that you have written or talked about in another format somewhere, or just general literature about this specific thing you're talking about, is there anything that you recommend people check out in more detail?
So the books that I read that connect this stuff are usually Egyptian, because this was known. This was far more known than it is now. I'm just going to pull it up because I have the book open, because I did want to share that with you. The Light of Egypt is the one that I would read, that anybody that really wants to understand this stuff. And that's people can find that on Amazon or someplace, right? You can find it on Amazon. And I think there's a few more, but if you actually just look up astrotheology, that will connect the stars and the theology and the religions. But there's so much more to it. You can go as far as you want with it. But if you understand the frequency and understand the sine wave, you can understand everything. And just Nicole, give you an example.
Oh, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Yeah. I'm just going to give you a couple examples that are really, really short. So I'll talk about the beginning. So we talk about the spring. So that's the beginning. And it's funny that the season is actually called spring. So something that explodes or moves upwards, right? So the first sign at the beginning of the sine wave is Aries. So Aries is the season where the sun starts at the spring equinox. So it's at the equator, right? So if you put a little dot at the beginning of the equator, okay? So yeah, this is also going to represent the sun's movement too. So it's a lot to connect into one teaching. So I'm hoping that I'm going to explain this properly enough that people can go out and look into it, because, and actually, I wonder if I have something that I could even share on my screen here that you could follow along with. Because if I have that, then this is going to make this so much easier.
Yeah. And for anyone listening on our podcast platforms, so you can go and probably see if Nicole's able to share this on this episode. You can see it on the YouTube episode of this. So just so you know, anyone listening. So basically, I want you to just envision a map of the Earth, okay? And picture, just like flatten it out like a map, and picture the sun's traveling along the ecliptic. So you have the Tropic of Cancer at the top, you have the equator in the middle, and then you have the Tropic of Capricorn in the bottom. And there's a reason why they're named those, because they're actually completely connected to the astrology that is not being taught, but it's on the maps, right? So in Aries, it starts at the equator and it springs up, right? So Aries is a sign of cardinal fire, so explosive fire or creativity. It's connected to the cerebrum, so the upper part of the brain where thoughts come from. So the ignition of a thought, that's what is represented in Aries. So that's where the sun is on the equator, the point where it's just beginning a new season. Then it moves into Taurus. Taurus represents the cerebellum, which is why it's represented by a bull and bellum. It's the same thing. And it actually kind of looks like a bell at the bottom of the brain. That's the lower mind. That's the material brain. And that's why Taurus represents the material world, or luxuries, possessions. So after that, when it goes into Taurus, the sun is then moved up a little bit, right? So it's in the sky just a little bit higher. Then it goes into Cancer. So Cancer is where the sun is, Gemini first. My apologies. So Gemini represents then the hands and lungs. They call it the twins, or Cain and Abel in the Bible, right? Bringing in air. They call it mutable air. So it's the element of air that is mutable, which if you think about that, what do the lungs do? They bring in air and they mutate it, right? And then it goes throughout the body. So that's why it's called mutable air. Then it goes to Cancer, which is represented the chest and breasts. So nurturing, motherhood, Mary Magdalene. And it's the highest point in the sun in the sky. That's where the Tropic of Cancer is. That's why when it's at the highest point, and then you can see we're kind of forming a sine wave, right?
And I'm going to send you this graphic because, again, me just explaining with my voice is probably going to be super weird. But the sun is at the highest point in the sky. So Cancer, it's nurturing. So why does it represent nurturing? Because it's giving you sun. Your crops are growing. It's the most potent time for health and food and birth and creativity and the whole 9 yards, right? It's represented by a crab because it's moving sideways, right? So the sun is moving sideways in the sky. And then it goes into Leo, which is also ruled by the sun. Leo rules the heart. So I believe Leo is fixed fire. So your fixed heartbeat, it's the constant thing that provides warmth to the body, and also your willpower, which is why Leo's called I will. They all have sort of like this weird little phrase to them. So it represents that part of the body. And so now you're at the highest point, Leo, the sun, like always represented by the sun, even in tarot. So the reason why it's represented by the sun in tarot, and by the way, the tarot represents the sine wave as well. It also goes into the seasons. It's crazy. All of this stuff is connected to the exact same teaching. So you can connect all of these things together, right? Then you go into Virgo. So Virgo is I analyze. So Virgos they're good at organizing, preparing, and preparing, and analysis. So why is that? Because that's the season that you're preparing your harvest, right? You're just getting ready to prepare prior to the fall, which, by the way, it's called the fall because the sun is falling, right? Down. It's starting to fall down the sine wave and starting to head back towards the equator. So Virgo rules the digestive, I believe it rules bowels, because Virgo is called mutable earth. So it mutates the earth that you put in your body and creates energy from it. And so same thing in the outer world, it mutates the earth. You're digging up earth, right? For fall harvest. So that's why literally everything within and without are exactly the same. Your body is in tune with all of these teachings. Next thing, you go to Libra. Libra is the balance, fairness, scales, equality, equator, right? Because the sun is at the equator, right? And it's at an equilibrium point where things kind of get justified. Libra is, I believe, cardinal air. I'll have to remember this, but it is an air sign as well. So it has a lot to do with thinking and preparing, all of the stuff that happened in the previous year. Then it goes into Scorpio. So Scorpio in the Bible is Judas the betrayer, and it's the scorpion who stings with his tail, right? Why is that? Because that's the sign that's sending the sun down into hell, down into the darkest point where the sun has its least amount of power, right? So that's what Scorpio is. That's what Judas did. He betrayed the sun. The sun is Jesus, right? So then it sends that energy back down. Also, just so you know, like Scorpio is also the regenerative system, sexual organs. And the symbol, the saying for Scorpio would be, I desire. So what I need, what I want. Then we move into Sagittarius, which is the dude with the big arrow, pointing his arrow at Achilles' heel. And so that arrow pointing is literally, he's pointing the sun to start going back up. And that we start getting into the darkest days of the sun. So the planets that actually rule this time are Saturn or Satan in the Bible. And it's funny because Capricorn, the one that's actually ruled by Saturn, the one we're going to talk about next, it's the 10th house in astrology. And if you break down the words say and 10, say 10, 10th house, Satan, ruled by Saturn, right? So all of this stuff, most people don't know, but it's all connected. And then Capricorn is the next one. It's the goat that's climbing up the hill. Also, you look at the sacrificial goat in Satanism and Luciferianism, it's Capricorn, because Capricorn rules Satan, materialism, utility, working, overeating. That's why these seasons are done. That's why Christmas is a materialistic holiday, because Italy actually used to call it Saturnalia. That's what Christmas used to be called, Saturnalia. It's a time when people would just eat their faces off, have orgies in the streets, drink wine, and go crazy. That was Saturnalia, but now it's Christmas. It's cute, right?
Wow.
Then we move up to Aquarius, which is the 11th house. The 11th house basically is preparing the waters are preparing the sun to go back. So if you look at Aquarian energy, Aquarian is about enliftment of humanity, about spirituality, being in between worlds, and basically humanitarianism. So we're helping to get the sun back where it needs to go. So if you meet the archetype of Aquarius, that's usually what their lives are playing out in this life.
Nicole, on that really quick, I was born on Valentine's Day, February 14th.
Oh, you're an Aquarius as well?
Yeah, February
Makes
14th.
sense.
So does that have anything to do with what I'm doing, you think?
Yeah, of course. It has everything to do with what you're doing. That's the funny thing, right? And that's you're playing out your archetype. It's the same thing as me. I was on February 11th.
Wow.
Very similar. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then the next one is Pisces. So Pisces is the place in between worlds. That's why you have a fish going upstream and a fish going downstream. One is living in the heavens and the complete unseen world that's about to be created. So Pisces is the place before Pisces is the place before creation. This is the hardest part for people to wrap their minds around about Pisces. Pisces is the void. This is why you have to have utmost faith in your work and your ascension, because if you can't get to the place where you trust, because Pisces is I believe. That's absolute faith in, like, a miracle could happen for me, right? You have to be in a place where almost nothing, this is like Joe Dispenza 101, right? Like, this is what this guy talks about, is like, you almost have to be just completely able to just allow what's going to happen. And that's how miracles happen. Well, that's Pisces. Pisces is the place in between worlds. So that's why, again, there's a fish going downstream into the material world, and there's a fish going upstream into the spiritual world. And then that place where the fish's tail then connects back to the next iteration or the next cycle that will be the next year, then you go back into Aries. So again, this will create a whole wheel that's a cycle. It's also the Taurus field that we talked about. So it's the sun going up, down, and then back, and going up, down, and back. It's the same thing over and over and over. These cycles literally play out in every single part of our lives. You have great cycles of 24,000 years that, remember I said we're leaving the age of Pisces? That's a 24,000 year cycle we just are leaving, going into the age of Aquarius. Now,
it's hard to believe that, but
well, that's why things are so crazy right now, because you look at Pisces. Pisces is mutable water, right? Mutable water. So things that change water, like turbulent waters. So as we go from one age to the other, things change fast. And then we're going into the age of Aquarius, which rules technology, artificial intelligence. Aquarius is a kind of a loner sign. Aquarius likes to, Aquarius loves social distancing. Aquarius is fixed air, so it's mental, it's mind. So that's why the mind is speeding up. It's interesting. If you look at the values of Aquarius, that's what's happening right now. Revolution, revolt. It's ruled by Uranus, planet of rebellion. That's what's happening. That's what, if people understood that we're in this cycle, they would understand why the whole world's revolting at once.
You know, Nicole, and thank you so much for that really great kind of crash course into this theme, because I think it's just absolutely fascinating. I think a lot of our viewers are just going to find it extremely, extremely, extraordinarily interesting as well. That when you were describing all that and how this is really all so connected and intrinsical in our life, and the way in which, you know, the cycle goes, no matter if we're aware of it or not, it kind of led me to think the way you're describing it, because of all the motion and all the way it's connected and all the meaning behind it, what it signifies to me in a certain way is that I think the trouble people have in general going throughout their life is that not being aware of these things, because they all have their own specific energies and forces of life, everything else. If we're not in alignment with that, there's a certain resistance factor that happens, and it can really throw off our day-to-day experience. That's the way would you concur with that?
Yeah, like you said, it happens with or without you. You don't have to have knowledge of any of this to survive. Right. This is not, but it's pertinent, because when you become out of alignment,
yeah,
and you know this stuff, you can literally get yourself back into it like that. You can also completely understand cycles. You can understand everybody you know. It just takes like, it takes the guesswork out of life, I guess. So it's kind of like a cheat code. You know what I mean? It's almost like if you were playing Sims and you had the cheat codes, like you know how to create everything just a little bit more easily. It doesn't take away the struggle and strife of the rest of the world. Like that'll never happen. But what it does, I think, for me is like it kind of just empowers you to be able to create a little bit more actively as opposed to being more of a passive participant.
But is that let me kind of explain this in such a way, like if there's, depending on where we are in general with whichever those cycles and parts of the cycle we are in and the time of history, let's say, however that helps not only understand where we are with it, but as we see human events unfold, whether we agree with them or not, does, like, for example, if we know what cycle we're in right now, according to everything you're saying, and then we see something happening in a certain society and it's totally against what we think or believe or align with, how much do we stay still in alignment with the actual cycle of these things versus being and going with the flow of the human event, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Your highest potential will mean that you're completely in alignment, and that's all you need to worry about.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. Because the thing is, because like if I don't know, like for example, I thought back to like the Arab Spring, for example, some years ago. You know, as you know, some people were really trying to set course in history in a time that never ever happened in that part of the world, really. I mean, it was really perpetuated, especially by technology and social media and influence that was on a different scale. But I mean, there were people who really wanted that kind of change, but then others who didn't. And so like, where do you align your, you know, like, where is it then that people can then align themselves to still be in the right sort of functionality of these cycles, you know? Yeah.
I think it's your awareness of your own alignment that will guide you to where you need to be. You know, like even if you're not living, like if your living situation or where you feel like you're living doesn't feel in alignment, you'll move, right? And you have an inner guidance, and that's a part of developing your intuition too, because there's like we look at animals, like birds, they just fly. They follow the electromagnetic frequency of the earth and they just go. Yeah. I think being disconnected to nature is what literally eliminates our ability to be able to do that and be where we need to be.
You know, and apart from all of the actual human activity, we have to get back to that understanding of everything else that is in part of this world, that is the actual nature, that is really the most important thing. And because it reminded me what you said about a documentary that I'd seen by an amazing photographer named Chris Jordan. Just a beautiful photographer, this guy. He does really, really amazing work. So many different types of photography, but he did a documentary actually as well. He's also makes documentaries, and he spent time, I think by himself and a couple crew on the Midway Islands in the Pacific. And this is an abandoned island. There's nothing there, nothing, no one, nothing. But what happens there is every year the albatrosses come and lay their eggs on that specific island, right? And he made the documentary because it was talking about ocean plastic pollution, because what he found was in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of nothing, nothing in sight, no living thing, whatever, is this island that was used during World War II for docking and loading and whatever else, but not anymore. There's literally nothing there except every year these birds come and lay their eggs. But then he did a documentary showing the actual plastic pollution. It was really sad and everything like that. But what was interesting with what you were just saying before, and why I bring this up, is that the albatrosses will fly I think they change between males and the females, but they will fly hundreds of miles and gone for many, many months just somewhere and go look for food and fill it up in their bellies.
Yeah.
And they come back several months later and then they feed their, spouse, bird, whoever it is, and then feed the little birdie, right? Their little kid. But they're, I mean, how do they have that orientation to come back to that island? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like for me, when I saw that, I was like, for me, when I saw that, I was like, this is a inexplicable act of intelligence or something, right?
Yeah, it's the universal intelligence. It's electromagnetic energy, and that's it. That's it. And they're just connected to it because there's no other. They don't have mind like we do. We are the evolution from the mineral to plant to animal to then human. We're the ones with the active minds, and the state of our minerals and our animals and plants and all that kind of stuff on the planet is the reflection of our mind. So that's how we can kind of like gauge our own health at this stage.
And whether
once we recognizing ourselves in those things, because we incarnated as those things, right? And that's why we are the evolution of those things on the planet.
Some people would argue, and based on what we're talking about with the initial setting of this conversation for this episode, whether or not having this human experience is what it's made out to be or should be made out to be. I mean, and just to kind of conclude with this final thought, Nicole, and again, thank you so much for giving our viewers and listeners the light of coming back on. And
thank you.
We really do appreciate it. Just coming full circle then, in a way, when people go throughout their life, in your opinion, and like just knowing these kind of things, and about the interconnectivity and the cycles and the patterns and really the things that if we really take the time to understand, know on a vibrational and cellular level, everything else, what would you say for people out there, let's just say right now, who may be feeling lost or just in a very, very difficult stage in their life? Like, what sort of last sort of insight could you give them to just say, hey, look, if you're feeling like this and you want to turn your life around today, whatever state you're in, this is what I would recommend start doing or looking at or researching? What would be your insight into that?
I would just learn the art of listening to your body, because like I've read something the other day, is even like if you're craving like crunchy food, that means you're anxious, because crunchy, salty, fatty food feeds emotion, right? Because fat and emotion are the same thing. And the crunching kind of alleviates anger. So I thought that was really interesting. So I just think that like just being in tune with what your mind is saying and where are the moments you are where you need to fill gaps, where you feel like you need to quiet yourself by, whether it's food, sex, alcohol, what are your vices? I would start looking at your dark stuff. Start doing shadow work. That's what shadow work basically means, is like looking at that bottom part of the sine wave. Look at that stuff, because a lot of people like put that to the side, and that's the stuff that builds up and creates the depressions and the anxieties. It's energy that doesn't have a place to go. It's unexpressed creativity, right? And it just sits in the body, and it's unresolved or unprocessed experiences, emotions, or actions, right? So unexpressed energy inside of the body creates disharmony, dis-ease, and restriction, and it cuts off the flow of circulation in your body. So I would literally just start with the physical body. You don't have to learn all of these like spiritual teaching. You don't have to know it. You really don't. You just have to learn how to listen to yourself and also start expressing energy in a way that you have energy equally coming in and equally going out.
That is so great, so insightful, and so profound, because unfortunately for me, I like the crunchy food bit, so I gotta.
Oh, so do I. I eat it every day. Like,
I gotta figure out.
I'm saying this to you, but I'm also like, my vices are exactly what I just told you. That's from experience. It's not like
I know.
It's not like, that I'm not doing it.
So how do I balance all that? Yeah. But no, but it is really profound that knowing that we can at any time if we decide to, it has to be intentional too. Like if we decide to really dedicate that time for ourselves and understanding ourselves and going deep within, these practices for ourselves, what we can really tap into an unbelievable type of knowing and love that is, maybe something we've never experienced before. And for all of our SpirLifters, all of our viewers and listeners, I think, you have an idea of that. And I really encourage you, check out more of what Nicole's work, connect with her as well, read what she's written, and really engage with her as well, because she can really provide tremendous insight and knowledge and everything else. So Nicole, again, like for maybe those who haven't heard or seen you yet so far, like where can people connect with you, know more about you, schedule work with you if you're available, everything like that?
So they can find me now. I've changed my website recently. You can find it. It's called Sacred Machines now. It's going to be called it's called that because it's basically a platform where I want to teach people about the electromagnetic body and the frequencies and all the stuff that we kind of talked about. So it's called Sacred Machines. I changed my Instagram handle that too. So that's probably the easiest way you can find me now. I'm still doing readings, but like I said before, I do them very sparsely. I do them very infrequently because it does take a lot of energy for me to do it. So I don't really love doing it. But if you want to read some of the stuff or keep up to date with me, I'm going to be posting more videos and more information and all that kind of stuff on there.
Perfect. Excellent. So we'll make sure to include all the information in the notes and the pins.
Thank you.
As usual, if people connect with you. And Nicole, it was an absolute pleasure again having you on for another episode of SpirLift. People really
thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Enjoy these conversations with you, and we will see you all on the next episode. Take care, everyone.